What secret pain could make Oprah Winfrey, the queen of daytime television, walk the empty streets like a stranger searching for something inside a church the world forgot? It was one of those New York nights when even the city's arrogance bowed to winter silence. No traffic, no voices. Just the wind dragging old newspapers across the pavement like forgotten stories. Oprah Winfrey walked alone, her heels clicking on concrete, her breath sharp and visible in the cold. A few hours earlier, she had stood on a glittering stage surrounded by cameras and celebrities, honored for a legacy that stretched decades. But what the world didn't see, what the cameras could never film, was the strange hollowness blooming in her chest like an unanswered question. She didn't know where she was going. Her driver had begged her to wait, but her soul had already started walking, and her body simply followed. Then suddenly, like something out of a dream, it appeared a crumbling Episcopal church at the end of a narrow street. Oprah stopped, her eyes locked on the heavy wooden door. It looked like no one had entered in years, but as she reached for the brass handle, it opened without resistance. Why would anyone leave a church open this late? She whispered, half to herself, half to the dark stone walls. Inside, the silence was almost sacred. Candles, left half-burned, flickered weakly along the aisles. Stained glass filtered the moonlight into fractured colors on the floor. She walked slowly, every step echoing in the emptiness, until she sat down in the third pew and just stared ahead. "I'm not here to pray," she murmured. "I just needed to disappear, somewhere God might forget to look." But God wasn't the only one watching. From the shadows near the altar, a voice rose low, worn but strangely warm. "Funny," the voice said. "This is exactly where people come when they want to be found." She turned quickly. Sitting by the altar was an older man, gray-bearded, wrapped in layers of tattered clothing, with eyes like fog over deep water. An outsider, a nobody. Or maybe not. "I didn't mean to scare you," he added gently. "I just come here when the shelters are too loud." "Do you sleep here often?" Oprah asked, her voice more curious than concern. "Only when I need to remember who I was," he replied, shifting his weight with a slow grace. "This place, it's not a home, but it holds the memory of one." Oprah studied him for a long moment. Most people would have called security or walked out, but she didn't move. Not yet. "What's your name?" she asked finally. "People used to call me Reverend Elijah," he said with a small smile, as if unsure whether he still deserved the title. "Now most folks just say old man if they say anything at all." "Reverend," Oprah echoed. "You were a minister." "Still am," he said, nodding slowly. "A man's purpose doesn't always end when his church does." She looked down at her gloved hands and said, "Funny. I came in here tonight because I realized I still can't forgive someone, and I don't even know if I want to anymore." Reverend Elijah didn't speak for a while. The silence stretched but didn't break. When he finally answered, his voice was steady. "Then maybe you've finally come to the right place," he said calmly. Oprah leaned back into the pew, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't explain. "Why is it," she asked quietly, "that the people who hurt us the most are the ones we carry with us the longest?" Reverend Elijah exhaled slowly. "Because pain carves a deep place in the soul," he explained, "and only love or grace can fill it again." And for the first time in years, Oprah listened without needing to respond. The church was even quieter now, as if it were holding its breath. Oprah hadn't spoken for a while. She stared at the altar, not with reverence, but with conflict. The name she had buried for years was suddenly rising again, pressing behind her lips. "You said pain carves a deep place," she said finally, her voice firm but wounded. "So deep, sometimes it feels like it becomes your identity." Reverend Elijah leaned forward slightly. The light from a nearby candle caught the edges of his eyes, revealing more warmth than judgment. "It only becomes your identity if you let it settle there too long," he replied with gentle conviction. "What name have you let define your silence?" She looked down, clenched her hands, and then said it, quietly, sharply. "Vernon." Reverend Elijah didn't flinch. He had no way of knowing the weight that name carried for her, the betrayal, the trauma, the broken childhood, but his silence acknowledged its gravity. My cousin, he, he abused me, repeatedly. When I was just a girl, she confessed, her voice steady but broken beneath. And I forgave him publicly. I said the words, but I never meant them. Not truly. He nodded slowly and respectfully. That kind of wound, he said softly, isn't healed by speeches, or cameras, or time. It's healed by something far more uncomfortable. Truth. And truth starts with admitting, I haven't forgiven you, and maybe I never will. Oprah turned toward him, surprised. You're a reverend. Aren't you supposed to tell me that forgiveness is the only way to be free? Reverend Elijah gave a sad, knowing smile. Freedom isn't always neat, he explained. It doesn't always look like a Sunday sermon. Sometimes freedom is just telling your truth out loud, in a place where someone finally hears it. She looked at him, eyes glassy but not crying. So what do I do with this? This bitterness that never left? You name it. You feel it. You sit with it long enough that it doesn't own you anymore, he answered. People think forgiveness is a gift we give others, but sometimes it's just the final word in a conversation they never deserved. Oprah blinked slowly, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't healing yet, not exactly, but it was the first honest breath she had taken in years. Do you believe God sees me differently because I haven't forgiven him? She asked. Reverend Elijah shook his head slowly. No, he replied. I believe God weeps with you and waits for the day when your anger doesn't have to carry all the weight alone. The candles flickered again, as if agreeing, and in that sacred hush, Oprah felt something loosen, not gone, but shifted, and she stayed. Not as a celebrity, not as a woman with answers, just a soul, seated in quiet reckoning, with an old man who had seen too many nights just like this. The silence stretched, not the awkward kind, but the sacred kind, like both of them were waiting for something unseen to settle between them. Outside, the wind had picked up, and the church windows rattled faintly, as if trying to interrupt what was unfolding inside. Oprah shifted in her seat, her voice lower now, not because she feared being heard, but because her words were finally meant for someone who was truly listening. There's something strange about saying his name out loud, she admitted. It's like letting a ghost back into the room. Reverend Elijah rested his palms gently on the wooden table between them, nodding. But sometimes ghosts lose their power when they're named, he answered. They become what they always were, memories, not monsters. Oprah closed her eyes. For a moment, she seemed to disappear into a place no camera had ever followed her. Then she asked, have you ever hated someone so deeply, Reverend, that it changed who you were? The old man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photograph, creased, faded, nearly torn at the edges. He slid it across the table. It was a picture of a young woman, smiling, holding a baby in her arms. Her eyes were bright, but there was something heavy behind them. My daughter, he explained, voice trembling with a rare vulnerability. Taken from me in a robbery gone wrong. The man who did it served 10 years. He writes me letters now. Says he found God in prison. Oprah looked at him, surprised. Do you write back? She asked. I burn every letter, he replied without anger, just truth. And yet, every time I do, I whisper his name, so that I never forget the weight of the choice not to forgive. She exhaled slowly. I always thought forgiveness was like a door you walk through, she said. But maybe it's more like a door you guard, one you're not always ready to open. Reverend Elijah leaned back, smiling softly. And there's no shame in keeping it closed, as long as you know what's behind it, he responded. You don't owe anyone your peace, Oprah. Not even God rushes a blooming tree. They both stood, as if signaled by some shared awareness that the conversation had reached its end, not with closure, but with clarity. As Oprah turned to leave, she paused by the church door and looked back at him. Thank you, she said, her voice clearer than before. Not for answers, but for not being afraid of my questions. He smiled gently, hands clasped behind his back. Come back when the door feels a little lighter, he replied. Not when it's gone, just when it creaks less. She nodded once and stepped out into the cool night. The city noise greeted her like it always had, but something was different. She walked away from the church not with relief, not even with certainty, but with a quiet understanding that some wounds are not meant to close neatly, they are meant to breathe. In that small, dimly lit chapel, where the air still smelled of wood polish and whispered prayers, Oprah had not found redemption or resolution. What she had found was a mirror in the eyes of an old man who had also been shattered, who had also chosen silence over revenge, and who knew the cost of carrying grief like a sacred stone. Forgiveness, she realized, was not a staircase you climbed once and forever. It was a daily reckoning, a whispered decision, a pause before rage, a prayer in the middle of a sentence you never finish. And maybe that was enough. There was power in her pain, yes, but there was also power in owning it, in not needing it to be fixed. For the first time in many years, she understood that healing did not mean erasing the past. It meant sitting with it, unafraid, and saying, I remember, I feel it, and still I rise. She would continue her life, not lighter, but braver, because she had stepped into the darkest part of herself and dared to speak it aloud. Let's keep the conversation going. Subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts below. Your perspective is valuable and might inspire others.